Heyo. Heyo. All right. First things first, before we move on to project proposals, we gotta play this party game at least a couple times with the group. Obviously, you're gonna do it in your peer review too, but it's no fun if that's the only place you get to show it off. Who is very proud of their formal rap submission and wants to show it off? I will keep your name anonymous. You can DM me if you want, or you can just say your name and or say you're proud of it in chat too if you prefer. But let's get at least a volunteer to give me theirs, and we'll all try to guess it. Bloog, you're already semi-anonymous there, so let's see if yours is up to the task of getting my criticism live. uh, oh my, this is a long one. This is okay. All right, that's a pretty good one. Let's go for it. I'm gonna leave your real name off of it. Let's see if I can get it into Notepad. Oh no, it took all the formatting away. Okay, try to figure this out. How to get this. Hold on. All right, perfect censorship. Job's done. FBI, if you're looking for somebody to black out your documents, I'm available for hire. Okay. Let's see if we can guess the song here that Bloog has chosen as his formal rap. And we have another volunteer who's not proud of theirs, which I think just makes it all the more interesting. So when we're talking about converting text into formal English, we're talking about taking away the emotion. Again, remember, we're talking about making it clean. We're talking about obviously upping the language so that we're more specific about what we say. So we don't say things in plain English. Plain English expressions typically have a lot of meanings. There's a lot of idiom thrown around, a lot of slang. That is to say, basically modern idioms. So we're trying to strip all of those away and be very literal and specific about what we mean. So let's see if this is really literal, specific, uses formal and specific language, and then also is not very emotionally evocative, which obviously most rap is emotionally evocative. So when I rise with the dawn of a new day, my rituals consist of making a quick cup of pre-made coffee. I don't know if a quick cup is an essentially formal expression, making a quick cup of coffee, but yeah, I would say that it qualifies. I'm not sure what a pre-made coffee is. I'm guessing an instant. Probably be something like an instant coffee. That name drop sure did give it away fast, someone said. You don't know that it's Maine. It could be Maine like the state. I only know one rapper from Maine. It's Spose, so I'm guessing this is Spose just based on the fact that it's Maine. That's only from reading the first line. You let me know if I'm right. Oh, sorry, I skipped some lines. Of pre-made coffee, smoking marijuana, and trimming my facial hair with a sharp razor. Now, marijuana is the slang term for narcotic, so that's a no-no. What's the formal term for that narcotic? Does anybody know the formal term? History of why it's named marijuana. Marijuana is a word that was invented in the 50s or 60s or so to make the drug sound scarier to middle-class America. It's a slang term that derives from the Latin American slang for that particular narcotic. So let's see if someone can guess what the actual formal term for it is. If you were a doctor and you were prescribing somebody that, you would call it cannabis. Somebody said that right. So a doctor wouldn't say, I'm prescribing marijuana. Well, they might today because it's become part of the vernacular, but at a certain point, it would have been impolite to call it marijuana. And trimming my facial hair with a sharp razor. I then proceed to read a book, but my hat is not properly adjusted on my head. I don't know what that means. So here, you translated it literally, but you kind of lost whatever the original implication was in plain English. And that obviously happens a lot when you convert something from plain English, which is expressive and idiomatic, to formal English, which is not expressive and is specific. Well, you lose the implication. So you proceed to read a book, but your hat is not properly adjusted on your head. Those things have no connection to one another, other than that the guy's hat is falling off, so what, it makes it difficult to read? That doesn't make sense. I forgot to mention that I was conceived in the geographical area that they regard as Maine. I would say that the more formal way to say that would just be, I am from Maine, or I neglected to mention that I am from Maine. At the time of writing this song, I have been ignoring paying my bills, for I hate those who collect them. Sure, that's formal. My motivation would be unhinged if I did not disregard my responsibilities and watch films by the adult actress Jaden James. Not sure what that means. What does it mean for your motivation to be unhinged? My rusted automobile has an adhesive sign on the back of it, which refers to the athletic team, the Boston Celtics. Would you say, if you were talking about the Boston Celtics, that they are an athletic team? That would be a very weird way to express it. The lyrics to the song were written by myself and no one else, but I have considered dropping out of this musical genre and selling my professional sound recording technology so I can afford an automated vehicle purpose for traveling through frozen precipitation. Is that supposed to be a snowmobile? Snowmobiles aren't automated. They are an automobile of sorts, but I wouldn't call them an automated vehicle. Yeah, that's definitely not a snowmobile. If that's what that's supposed to be. Jet ski, maybe? Water? No? Not sure. I do not have enough money to enter a club known for its scantily clad women and give what to said women there. Instead, I have tired myself out with minimum wage jobs. Okay, so I think that's enough for this one. So, a lot of translation of the plain English into its very literal interpretation, but in translating it to its literal interpretation, you have lost all of the meaning behind why these expressions were made in the original. So, when you are taking stuff that is in plain English and trying to formalize it, remember not to lose the original meaning. Someone said maybe he meant the self-driving snowmobile. If he did mean self-driving snowmobile, then I rescind my previous comment. That's great. A lot of these parts are well converted to the implications, to the formal kind of expression, the more detailed one, but a lot of them, again, are like basically robotic kind of translations, very literal translations, and you don't end up getting the meaning. So I would say it's a pretty good one overall because the language is very formal. There's not a lot of plain expressions there, but it does lose a lot of the meaning of the original piece. In fact, I don't even get the point of this piece, right? This is like just a series of non sequiturs in its formal translation. A bunch of expressions about yourself, whereas the original probably had some kind of more coherent narrative to it. So, I guess you don't have to reveal the name of the song. We'll leave that to your peer reviewer. I already gave away that it was Spose, because no one else is from Maine. Alright, let's look at Awesome Blue Man's next. All right. See if anyone can guess Awesome Blue Man's. I require another reason to get up in the morning than to spend my day going to the World Wide Web and checking my mobile cellular device for messages from acquaintances. I like that this keeps the meaning of the original expression, that you require another reason to get up in the morning besides browsing the internet. I don't like the use of the lengthened terminology to just sort of increase the word count because it doesn't add any additional nuance. Like calling it World Wide Web versus internet just makes you sound like you're from the 80s. It doesn't actually make it formal, right? You can say internet in formal conversation. You would only say World Wide Web if you were being transported back in time to the 80s. And then similar for mobile cellular device, you would just say cellular phone or cell phone. You probably wouldn't say mobile cellular device. In fact, I think mobile and cellular are kind of redundant, right? Can you have a non-mobile cellular device? Can you have a stationary cellular device? Probably not. So I think that's just extra words for the sake of extra words. But I like that the expression has some of the original meaning, the fact that they don't want to get up in the morning just to spend their day browsing the internet and checking their mobile device. I shall rise from my bedside with my head held high, with some modesty and caution. Despite my modesty, I am aware that I am quite unique and that there is no one else like me. My music is equally as unique and comparable to those of other great musicians. Ah, okay. Doesn't sound like a lot of modesty there. Okay. My closest companions are similarly talented as I. They have performed on the best stages across the world. Their talents are all distinctive, nurtured, and handmade during our lives. I don't know if a talent can be handmade. I guess a talent can be nurtured. I'm not sure. It doesn't make sense really to me. Each work of art that I produce contains the essences of my being. I then showcase my passion, my art, and my talents while on the largest stages in the world. Alright. The paycheck I receive from these large events drives my desire to create music and perform, but not for financial gain. My true drive is to give back to my community and aid the next generation of musicians. Sure. Okay. Well, any comments on this one? Overall, I think that it is pretty solid. Someone offered a home phone as an example of a stationary cellular device, but then that wouldn't be cellular. So that's not really the same thing. um, a little bit of additional wording here in the translation to formality, but I think it gets across a lot of the original meanings, and it does at least keep a coherent narrative, as does the original. So it is a piece that can be followed, which is good. It's difficult to pull off. Yes, overall, I like it. I can't guess the song on this one. Let me think about that for a sec. Nope. Can't guess it. It'll probably come to me when I'm done streaming. This is a tough game to play live. Alright, with that, let's go into project proposals. Just minimize that. Come back to it. I want to guess that song. Whoops. Don't want full screen. Okay, so project proposals. Now that we know how to do some formal writing, hopefully not in rap lyric form, it's time to look into some things that require you to write formally, and one of those things, probably the most important one to software professionals, is project proposals. I assume at least some of you will end up as freelancers at some point in your career, or you'll work for a company where you participate in the proposal process, so this should be somewhat relevant to you. I don't have a ton of experience writing project proposals, but I have some. The family business isn't altogether that successful. The largest one I've ever written was for 50,000, but I mean that's better than most, right? So I know a little bit about what I'm doing in this department, which is better at least than my experience with resumes, where I'm not particularly, well versed. I give you some more feedback here than I would give you in others. So project proposals, what are they for? Are they just for salespeople? No, not really, not necessarily. In fact, I consider most of your white-collar professional work to be one long series of different proposals. At a lot of different points in your career, you'll have to ask your bosses for money for some project that you want to do. That's a proposal of sorts. I know quite a few people who are in jobs where what they do regularly is some sort of small-scale project development at their company, and a big part of their job is just the writing out of the proposals in order to get the money to do that project. In fact, I would say almost everyone I know who works an office job has to write a proposal at some point for a project that they're involved in. Asking for a raise is a proposal of sorts. In that case, you're asking for a increase in money for yourself. It's definitely a different environment, but it's definitely in a similar family. And then trying to propose to the group, to the management or whatever, to do a project in a certain way, or just to take on a project in general, those both call for a certain kind of proposal. And I would say the format for all of these different uh, not quite proposal things is very similar. But here we're talking first about formal proposals, which are primarily for salespeople. However, in software and in many other industries, it is the developers that work on the proposal as well. It is not just the salespeople. In fact, sometimes the salespeople do the work of procuring the contract or establishing the relationship, and then the writing of the proposal is relegated to the development team or the team that's actually doing the work. That's not an unusual situation. So formal proposals are really tough because they ask you to predict the future, in a sense. You need to predict how much workload is going to be required, how much you anticipate it's going to cost you. You're expecting to make a profit on this, so you need to know how much it's going to cost you or your organization. And then you need to anticipate different shortfalls and contingencies and exceptions to all of the terms that you specify, because if you don't anticipate those, they will very quickly eat into your profits and ultimately lead to the project being abandoned in most cases. When you look at projects that have failed, even at very large companies, you will typically find that they failed because the proposal was not given sufficient attention, or there were mistakes made in the writing of the proposal. So the proposal phase is actually where projects are more likely to fail than in the development phase. In the development phase, when you run into problems, it's really the fault of the people who wrote the original proposal if those problems aren't anticipated. And that's easy to say, but at the same time, knowing what problems you're going to run into is obviously very, very difficult. So how do you write a proposal for something like software, which is really, really hard to anticipate the problems you're going to run into? When you write a proposal for a construction job or something, it's pretty obvious how long it's going to take and what it's going to cost you. When you write a proposal for software, especially a software that's novel and hasn't been done before, that's a very different beast. Predicting the future is hard. Most customers, though, they expect the construction style proposal. They're used to all of their different proposals being in a standard format. So if they buy a new door for their building, or if they buy a new carpet for their office, they know they're going to get a fixed list of the items they're provided and the time it's going to take and costs and all of that thing that they expect. So if you come to them as a software developer and you say, I can't give you that, it probably won't fly. So typically speaking, you're going to have to provide something like a standard proposal that you would see in other industries where it's easier to estimate what you're going to give and how much it's going to cost and when it's going to be delivered. So I think a good way to do it is to provide a range or give some sort of probability distribution of how long you think it's going to take you. One nice website that I've discovered for this kind of thing is a site called Eastigator. Let's check out what that looks like here. And this is just to provide you a template for how you might do it. You certainly don't have to use Eastigator. So Eastigator lets you make these estimates with a kind of probability distribution for each of your tasks. And then at the end, it gives you this kind of breakdown of how likely it is that the job is going to take, as long as it's going to take, based on the probabilities that you provided. And if you've got a nice mathematical slash tech savvy customer, you might deliver this to them, or you might just use this for your internal purposes and then give the customer something a lot more simple when you write up their proposal, like a range, for example, of the days that it's going to take. So let's say you've got some UI to do, you know that's going to take you somewhere between 4 and 7 days. You got some mock-ups to do, it's going to take you 2 or 3 days. Then the sign-off, it should take a day. You're 75% sure it's going to take a day, but about 25% sure it's going to take 2 days. So see how this is going. We've got some probability stuff going on there. So let's say that your development process, you're really not sure. You're like 10% confident it's going to be done in a week. You're 20% confident it's going to be done in 2 weeks. This is a great way to express that sort of thing for all the different phases of your project. Once you have something that looks like this, I find that it's a lot easier to decide how much you actually should be charging, because this is a estimate of how much time it's going to take you. You know how much your company's time or your time is worth. So once you get to this point where you have a decent idea of how much it's going to take you, and I would advise you to be pretty pessimistic in this phase, right? So if you think something is going to take you 10 days, say 10 days with like, I don't know, 10 days with an 80% probability. If you feel like you're 100% sure it's going to take 10 days, just say 10 days with an 80% probability. And let's say 20 days for the remainder, because even if you're sure, you're often going to be wrong. Once you've got this time estimate broken down, you can decide how much you're going to charge. And again, you can give a range. So like it's going to take somewhere between 10 and 20 days. Generally speaking, a range for costs is not going to fly very well. The customer's just going to assume you're going to charge them the upper estimate for that. But if you give them a time range and then you tell them that the billing structure is going to be hourly or weekly or something like that, that can often fly, especially if you guarantee that you'll be done by the upper estimate to that range. Then the customer is able to estimate the highest amount of expenditure that they'll have to expend. And this is another reason why customers often want to see a list of items and times and everything, because they want to know how they can budget for this particular project. Now you could just try to explain to your customers that estimating software is hard, but that probably isn't going to work. Obviously for industries that are more familiar, yes, but for others, no. There was a lovely IBM contract someone mentioned in the chat that was with IBM and some state, I don't remember which, to redesign their unemployment system or one of their payroll systems related to that. And $200 million or so later, they still had nothing because their proposal was crap. So maybe we'll look at that one again in this class. There are many examples just like that of companies failing to deliver anything because their proposal was too vague. And on the other end, you have organizations that I mentioned exist earlier, but I don't want to mention by name because I don't want to badmouth them, that are notorious for taking a proposal and then once they have a proposal, a signed contract, they deliver exactly what was asked for within the time it was asked for. And oftentimes what they end up delivering is useless or ends up not being nearly what the customer wanted, but because that's what the customer signed off on in the proposal, they got exactly what they paid for. So those are two ends of the problem with bad proposals. There's the end as the customer, where you didn't read it carefully enough and make sure you were getting exactly what you wanted. And then there's the end as the software company, where you promise too vague and end up never finishing and potentially not getting paid either. So to start, when you're writing a proposal, if there is one, read the request for proposal. Big companies and small companies alike will often issue a request for proposal when they're looking for a piece of software to get done. Software companies will seek these out and place bids. Occasionally, well, not occasionally, often the company that puts up the RFP will send messages out to companies they've had a relationship in the past or companies they think will be a good fit for their project, and they will ask them to submit a bid. So privately submitted bids in that case. But for public contracts and many other contracts, the RFPs are posted somewhere publicly, and someone in your sales department will likely hunt them down, or obviously if you're a small-time job, perhaps you will hunt them down. You should always read the RFP if there's one available and tailor your proposal to what is in there. But if it's an important bid for you personally or for your company, then you should always reach out to them directly. I know for me it's important to always reach out directly, because whatever's in the RFP was likely written by one person anyway. It's better to just talk to that person and see what they want. So the basics, let's start with, is generally on the front page, you're always going to lead with an executive summary. You're obviously going to have the letterhead of your company and all of that lovely stuff on the top. Sometimes your actual front page will be something like your legal compliance statement that this is a proprietary proposal, blah, 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 some company letterhead and all that stuff. But the first real page, the page of actual writing, is an executive summary, where you're going to describe the entire project in as little detail as possible. So you're going to really make a high-level summary of it. I would say that you would almost never go over a page. Even if you look at multi-million-dollar projects, so if you'll dig up proposals for something like, I don't know, let's say the design of the website for the Affordable Care Act or something. So that's a massive project. That's many, many millions of dollars. I'll see if I can pull that up later. Most of the public projects that you know of. If you could think of something more expensive, actually, post it in another channel, see if I can pull that up instead. But think of the most expensive public project that you know of. Public because their stuff is subject to disclosure, so it's going to be somewhere on the internet. And even their proposal, their executive summary, is probably just one page long, a couple paragraphs. Right, so even for a multi-million-dollar project, it's a couple paragraphs. If a multi-million-dollar project can describe the general details in a couple paragraphs, then I think you can too. You'll commonly see the use of I and we will expressions here. This is a little bit different than what you're usually taught to do in formal language, where you avoid I and we. Someone mentioned Space Force. I don't think they contracted that out, so I don't think that one will work. And I don't think that's software either. You could say the guidance software for missiles or something, but I don't know if that's more expensive than the Affordable Care Act website. I think that's the most expensive piece of software specifically that the company's ordered in a while, the country's ordered in a while. I don't know. I could be wrong. It could be more expensive software out there. So you'll use I and we expressions, unlike in most formal statements, because you're trying to say explicitly what your company will do. So you'd say things like we will or our company will. I think we is the preferable one here because our company is longer and you're already trying to save on length. One-man operations can use I, or they can use what we call the royal we, right? Even if there's just one of you, you can write in the royal we. I like the royal we. I would say if you're writing a proposal, you should always use we, even if you're a one-man contractor operation. You're trying to tell the customer in as little space as you can how you're going to solve their problem. And then you always want to put your cost estimate right there on the first page. So tell them the brass tacks, what's the dollars going to be right there on the front, because customers will probably just read that first page. If they decide to move on, then they'll read the rest. But if that figure is too high, then yours goes in the can. If that figure is too low, then they might go, these people aren't very serious, and also throw it in the can. So don't price yourself too low, especially among freelancers and people getting started. This is a common mistake. They will price themselves too low. They'll price themselves so low that they will not be taken seriously. Right. So as a software developer, I would say that for your time, you should not take, even in this city where the cost of living is pretty low, you should not take anything less than $50 an hour for your time as a freelancer. But I would really recommend the minimum being more like 100. I'd say the hourly rate of any professional in any industry is something like $300 an hour. So if you are a professional HVAC technician, a professional plumber, a professional electrician, or a professional software developer, eventually, as you tend towards some kind of level of mastery, you're probably going to command something like $300 an hour rates. And you can easily see this if you go and try to order a professional plumber or a professional electrician or a professional carpenter or anything else. You will quickly see that their rates get very close to that as the level of skill required to do the work gets to any reasonable level. So you might be able to get somebody to, I don't know, paint or fix a leaky toilet for 50 an hour. That's kind of the equivalent of junior level software developer, but you are not going to get anybody to do anything more complicated than that for less than $100 an hour. Good luck. All right, so next you are going to give them a list of all of your offerings, and this is going to be usually in some kind of bulleted list format, often broken down into subsections or in paragraph form. And this is the most important part, I would say, because you are trying to capture the entire scope of the project. You are trying to capture all of what you intend to offer, the whole list of products and services and features. That includes what you're going to give them, the warranty, the performance requirements on it, how it expects to respond, how you're going to service it after the fact. All of that should be captured in list form. Sometimes the date that you plan to deliver items is included here, but not always. Sometimes you don't have anticipated completion dates. Sometimes you just say the whole project will be done by this date in the executive summary rather than giving deliverables in phases. However, you have been taught to program under the Agile model, which means you should have phases of deliveries. You should have quick prototyping and then iteration on those prototypes. In fact, for your senior design projects, we are halfway through the semester now. If you don't already have a prototype that you've showed to your customer, you're not very agile, are you? You're just trying to deliver it all at the end, and that's not agile programming. So you should try to get something out or shown to your customers within at least the next week here, if you haven't already, and keep on iterating on it and get their feedback as periodically as is possible. It's not too much of a burden on their time to get them the right thing. Someone said, imagine having a prototype in chat. Yeah, you might even have a finished product by now. Go figure. Generally, you don't include line item costs here, especially not for software, because software doesn't really have line item costs. If you're like a plumber, you can say, okay, each toilet is $150 or something. So, okay, maybe in that profession it makes sense. But even then, you probably wouldn't put line items. If you were doing all of the toilets in a property, you would probably just say what the whole job costs, because no one's going to buy the toilets a la carte. But for software, it's even less reasonable. You're not going to say, okay, the UI is $1,000, and then the back end is $2,000. They're not going to buy it a la carte anyway. So don't have line item costs at all in software, really. It's very important that you fully summarize everything that you agreed to do, because this is generally considered a binding contract once signed, and occasionally you will even say explicitly what you do not expect to provide, so that there's no confusion about what the customer is not getting. Failing to do this can lead to situations where your multi-million-dollar contract ends up falling through and you don't get paid because the customer was expecting something that you weren't expecting to give them, and the ambiguity does not work in your favor. And last, you want to give your series of fancy pictures. I would say that any good proposal has a series of fancy pictures. They don't have to necessarily be pictures. They can be some sort of diagram. They can even be explanatory text if you prefer. But I like to see pictures, maps, figures, charts, graphs, mock-ups, whatever. These things show that you have a vision for the project, that you're not just talking out your bum when you're saying what it's going to look like and how it's going to look like. Granted, it's not particularly hard to draw up a mock-up in Paint, but at least it shows that you know what you're doing a little bit and you slightly know what you're talking about. You can also include other supporting information here. If you're delivering something that looks like something else, you could take a screenshot of that. Just, be careful about running into copyright laws and all that nonsense, especially if you're plagiarizing someone else's work. If you are putting some sort of performance requirements, you might want to put some graphs or something here. If there's some math involved, you might want to put your math in here. If there's some patents involved, you can link to your patents. Whatever it is that you have, if you're using maybe some third-party libraries to implement your stuff, you might want to say it explicitly, provide it here. If you've got some kind of licensing agreement that's going to happen after the fact, you might want to link to it here. All kinds of supporting information just goes in this general addendum section at the end so that the customer can easily reference what you're talking about from the complete list of stuff that you expect to provide in the previous section. But again, the priority here is to make it look like you know what you're doing and that you have a vision. Give the customer something to look at. That's not just your wall of deliverables. And these instructions in this general format, I think, again, applies not just to formal proposals. It applies to anywhere where you're proposing to do a job. I try to follow these 3 steps whenever I am trying to get something done. I always provide that existing executive summary, that list of what I plan to do, and then some fancy pictures. Now, granted, I don't have a ton of opportunities to do this in academia, but this is how I do things if I'm trying to get something from somebody. If I want somebody to accept my idea to do some kind of job or implement a new activity, I'm going to try to format it this way. I'm going to summarize what I want to do, list exactly what I want to do specifically, and then offer them some fancy pictures. So if you ever see me doing this for a class, now you know what I'm doing. All right, any questions before we sign off for the day and get ready for senior design? We'll look at some examples next time. Let's see if in the last 2 minutes here I can find the proposal for the Affordable Care Act. And if you can find it before me, let me know and just link to it. We're looking for the software company that got the contract or any other, it doesn't matter. I'm sure they're all quite expensive either way. It's a very big piece of software, obviously, nationally used, so let's see if we can find the project proposal for the Affordable Care Act. Not going to be easy, I'm sure, because finding government documents rarely is. Did IBM win it? That would be great. All right, well, we're out of time for today. I will try to find it and show it next time. We'll have a look at that. And again, if you can come up with a more expensive piece of software, let's do that one. I want to do the most expensive piece of software the government has done in recent memory. Okay, see you guys in senior design.